Good morning. Before we open the council meeting up, just a couple of housekeeping notes. If you have a cell phone with you, as I do, it would be helpful if you would put it on mute right now. And if you were here and you'd like to speak to the council at some time, if you would go outside, there's a sign-up sheet out there, tickets to sign up, and we will call on you when your item comes up. There will also be a time for you to speak at the end of the meeting, items from citizens. So that being said, let's have our invocation. We're honored today to have the Associate Pastor of Southern Hills Baptist Church, Sean Paul, with us to give the invocation. If you'd all please stand. And then at the conclusion of the invocation, Councilwoman Nikki Nice is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Pastor.
Would you pray with me? Our Heavenly Father, we bow before you today because you're worthy of our praise, you're worthy of our worship. Lord, we know that the day that you have made is given by you. And Lord, the life that we have is not, Lord, just by happenstance. It's because you have given breath in our lungs and our hearts to beat today, and we give you thanks for that. Lord, I thank you for our city council. I thank you for this great city of Oklahoma City. And Lord, I pray today, Lord, as you've taught us to pray, that your will would be done and that your kingdom would come. Lord, give our city leaders great wisdom, discernment, and compassion as they make difficult decisions today. We love you, and we acknowledge that you are Lord of heaven and earth. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please pledge with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, let's call to order the July 16th, 2019 meeting of the Oklahoma City Council. First item, nothing for office from the mayor. We need to receive and approve a couple of journals. We need to receive the journal of proceedings for July 2nd, 9th, 11th, and we need to approve the journal of proceedings for June 18th. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please cast your votes. And it is so done. Next, request for uncontested continuances.
Yes, sir. On page 13 in the agenda, under item 9B, it's PUD 1694. This item has been withdrawn by the applicant. On page 14, under unsecured structures, item 9G1, all of these items will be stricken from the agenda. Item A is 5000 South Agnew Avenue that the owner has secured. Item C, 4202 Cunningham Drive to re-notify the owner. Item D, 1016 South Fairmont Avenue, owner has secured. Item F, 3904 South Harvey Avenue, the owner has secured. On page 15, continuing those items, item M, 4024 Northwest 26th Street, the owner has secured. Item P, 612 Southwest 34th Street, the owner has secured. Item Q, 1541 Southwest 34th Street, the owner has secured. Item S, 2930 Southwest 40th Street, the owner has secured. Item T, 1 Southwest 43rd Street, the owner has secured. And then item Z, 8005 Northwest 100th Street, the owner has secured. On page 15, under abandoned buildings, item number 9H1, item A, 5000, and all these items will be stricken as well. Item A, 5000 South Agnew Avenue, the owner has secured. Item D, 1016 South Fairmont Avenue, the owner has secured. Item E, 3904 South Harvey Avenue, the owner has secured. Item N, 4024 Northwest 26th Street, the owner has secured. Item N, 612 Southwest 34th Street, the owner has secured. Item O, 1541 Southwest 34th Street, the owner has secured. Item P, 2930 Southwest 40th Street, the owner has secured. Item Q, 1 Southwest 43rd Street, the owner has secured. And then on page 16, item W, 8005 Northwest 100th Street, the owner has secured. And that's all the items.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Next on our agenda, we have a request for a revocable permit from Inmotive, Oklahoma. Is there anybody here from Inmotive, Oklahoma? Seeing none, it is in Ward 4 and Ward 7. Would one of the council persons from the ward like to speak to it and make a motion?
I'd just go ahead and make a motion to move the item.
Second.
Any discussion? Please cast your votes. And it is so done. Let us recess the council meeting, convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Authority, and we have several items on it. We can take one motion for all, can we not?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And it is so done. Let's adjourn the OCMFA and convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority. And the same thing, we have several items on here that we can take with one motion. We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And it is so done. Adjourn OCEAT, reconvene as the council meeting with a consent docket.
Yes, sir. On item AH, I'm sorry.
OC, we need it to approve OC.
Excuse me, let's go back up. We don't need to, we can just adjourn the OCPPA and convene as the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust. And we have two items. Comments or questions? Please cast your votes. Thank you, Francis. And it is so done. Reconvene as the council meeting now with a consent docket.
We do have a presentation on one item, that's on AH, so whenever we get to that, we'll have a presentation on that item.
I'd also like to pull that out for a separate vote if possible. So.
AH.
Any other items for?
Just for discussion, not for a separate vote, but AV.
I'm sorry?
AV.
AV? Any others? Seeing none, James, go right ahead, sir.
So, AV, for those of you who saw Councilwoman Hammond and I present on the sidewalk, bike lane, and streetlight presentation for maps 4. It just so happened to be that one of the images that I used was during that presentation was a conceptual rendering that relates to this particular project. And it was from Greening America's Communities. It's a street enhancement project on Walker.
I'm not sure. I'm
Sorry, AV, V is in Victor. What did you, as in boy? No.
There is no AV.
7A, oh, I'm sorry. 7V. Why did I hear A in my head?
Got it. Got it.
I'm so sorry.
sorry.
That's horrible. I do have coffee though, so we'll get there. I'm so sorry. Does everyone have a moment? Okay. So this is a street enhancement project that we had discussed. And I used a rendering from Greening America's communities. And I just had a question. I spoke with the Public Works Director yesterday about this project. I have a question about some, in Maps 4, at the very, very end of the presentations on August 6th, it talks about sustainable design. I don't know what that means yet, and I'm curious. I know that we're very likely not going to be able to do the curb cuts and rain gardens that I spoke to that are in that rendering, and I understand that because of budgetary concerns. I'm curious as we go forward, especially in Maps 4 and as it relates to our sidewalk project, how does sustainable design fit into that, which is a word that's used on the agenda itself, and how will there be allocations in addition to what we'd be asking for that? Because for me, the idea of doing the sidewalks and then having those curb cuts at once, and I'm not just talking about with this particular project, because this actually wouldn't quite fall in the Maps 4, but other areas, especially those 10 pedestrian priority areas. I'm curious, will we have an additional budget to go along with that? Because for me, drainage and sidewalks, if we can do those at the same time, it seems like an efficient use of our resources, and it's telling us that years down the road, we're actually getting ahead of drainage infrastructure costs, we're lessening for them. So it just seems to me like would be a way to be very prudent, responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars. I know it hasn't quite been the way we've done it before, but that's never a reason
Yeah,
to.
so I think that when we look at these types of projects, it's not to say that we can't do something like that. We'd have to look at all the engineering required, the right-of-way that's there and all. It's just that the reality of the amount of money that's going to be allocated to projects is, like if we're looking at the sidewalks, the amount of money that ends up being allocated to the sidewalks, if we do more enhancements to other parts of the sidewalk, like the rain garden concept, it's going to mean we're going to do less sidewalks. You mean it's like it's managing within the budget, so it's depending on how much money we have, we could do some of those more enhanced areas, and it's something that's a possibility. It's just we have to work through all the engineering of it, look at the cost, and it's a matter of how much money's there and working within the budget. So I think there's a lot of decisions that can be made on those. But I do think if we did that in every single situation, I'm confident there's going to be some situations that it doesn't fit, the application doesn't fit, but where it can fit, we can certainly look at that and what we could do and see what the cost would be, but it's going to greatly enhance the cost of the sidewalk project, which means there's fewer miles of sidewalk that we would do. So it's all about managing within the budget.
So that makes sense to me in terms of, not doing it to every sidewalk on maybe an arterial street, although I would still say it's something we should be thinking about because drainage is on all these streets, right? Mm-hmm. How can we go about when it comes to these street enhancement projects at the very least? I think we've got to prioritize it, I guess is what I'm saying. And even to your point of less is more. So like the budget we've been given for Maps 4 with sidewalks and budget is so, it's restrictive in terms of what we can do. And that's why we chose the 10 pedestrian priority areas that we did in Maps, because we thought, well, at least we can get a handle on something, right? So if we can focus on 10. But I don't know, I just really want us going forward as we look at those 10 projects, in addition to whatever street enhancements we could do with the historic districts that are going forward, that we prioritize sustainable design. That seems to me like a very efficient way to go about doing this. And I don't know how to quite make that part of the
I think those are
conversation.
discussions that we need to have. I mean, it's both kind of a planning and an engineering in what we're doing, but it's still, at the end, it comes down to what we're able to afford to do. When we're looking at the resources we have to prioritize. If we're looking at sustainable design, we have to prioritize that with what we need to do in terms of how many sidewalks we need in the city. And is it more important to try to stretch those sidewalk miles further than having maybe the sustainable design in a smaller number of sidewalks, or even in street enhancements, which how much we need to do with, And when we talk about street enhancements, a lot of times what we're doing is going back and just taking care of getting in better shape what we already have that's in bad shape. And so it's really a matter of priorities when we look at the financial obligation or commitment that we have from either one of those. But it's certainly something that we can continue to discuss.
Good. Who's going to be doing the presentation on sustainable design on August 6th? Is that going to be city staff? Anyone from?
I don't know that that was a separate presentation that we had.
Okay. I'm just curious because I would like to learn more. The more I've learned from attending the Congress for New Urbanism.
Sure. Sure, we'll get
councilperson.
together with you and get some staff together and we'll talk with you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, sir. Are we ready for our presentation, Mr. Manager?
Yes, we are. Brent Bryant, our Finance Director, is going to give a quick presentation on the jail building on AH.
Good morning. Today, this item before you is seeking authorization for staff to apply for certificate of appropriateness for the demolition of 3 buildings known as the public safety campus, in the public safety campus area over by the new police department. The 3 projects are the jail that was built in 1935, the municipal courts building that was built in 1951, and the police headquarters that was built in 1968. In addition to that, the jail was closed in 1997 as detainees were moved from that existing facility across the street to the Oklahoma County Jail. The facility they continued to be used by the city marshal's office until 2013, and then that was the building was totally abandoned at that time. The campus includes a 911 center that was opened in 2006, the new police headquarters that was built in 2015, and then the municipal courts building that was built in 2017. As you can see on this map here, the old jail, the old courts building, and the old headquarters are kind of sandwiched in between that, all those new buildings. One of the key projects here is the condition of the old jail. The jail is in extremely poor condition. The mechanical systems need to be replaced. The chillers and the electrical are all tied to the old police headquarters. There's asbestos, and the roof is in need of replacement, and it's leaking significantly, to the fact that where exterior stucco was falling off on the top floor. In addition to that, this building has constraints when it comes to redeveloping of the building, as the top 4 floors, which housed detainees, are limited to a height of 6'10" clearance. City staff many years ago, or a few years ago, did a study as to what it would take to redevelop the project, to renovate the entire building with 2 floors of office space, storage, and a new elevator, and they estimated a cost around $8.6 million. Demolition for the jail itself is estimated at right at $500,000.
But the $8.6 million would fix all the things that were just shown on that chart, correct?
Yes. It's my understanding that repair cost of $8.6 would provide for 2 floors of office space, storage, and a new elevator.
HVAC, asbestos removal, et cetera.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The city has gone through multiple steps to try to redevelop the old jail. We did it in 2012. We received 1 proposal from Allied Redevelopers, led by Marva Ellard. We could not reach an agreement on a deal with that. In addition, so in 2017, the city issued an additional RFP. We received one proposal, and it was from an entity that sought to just demolish the building. And then in 2017, we reissued the RFP through the planning department, and we received 2 proposals, another one from Gator and another one from Marva. And since that time, we've been in discussions with Allied Redevelopers as the developer. They estimated that they could redevelop the project for about $6.3 million. One of the concerns is that did not include the acquisition price in that budget. In addition to what they proposed, though, was a 24-hour restaurant, a laundry dry cleaning drop-off, shoe service, barbershop, sundry store, a fitness center, also with some executive offices, and then they wanted to do storage on the 5th and 6th floor. In 2018, council recommended them as a conditional redeveloper, but they gave them a deadline of June 30 of 2018 to enter into an agreement. Subsequent to June 30 of 18, we continue to work with Marva and trying to find an appropriate use and an appropriate mechanism to transfer the property, and we could not come to any consensus. And that's kind of where we are today. So approval of the resolution today would forward a application to the Downtown Design Review Committee for August 15th. After that, once that was approved, there'd be about a 5-month bidding process. The estimated cost of demolition of all 3 buildings is right at $2 million, and the construction of parking there would be right at $1.6 million, and we do have funding in place for that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Let me ask you a question if I could, Brent. Can I call on citizens to be heard at this point? And then call on Councilwoman Hammond to speak to this issue? Would that be okay, Mary? Okay. Let's hold off questions for Brent for just a minute, and let's hear from 2 citizens who signed up to be heard. First citizen is Matthew Pierce. If you would, sir, give us your name and address, and limit your comments to about 3 minutes, if you would.
Yeah, my name is Matthew Pierce. I'm with Preservation and Design Studio at 616 Northwest 21st Street. I am the historian on staff. My main responsibility is to write National Register nominations, write tax credit applications, and those sorts of things. So I'm here, of course, today to stand in support of the redevelopment of the jail building and not its demolition. Our goal as a studio is to urge you to support and preserve this building. And my supervisor, Catherine Montgomery, has been in this process since at least 2012 in trying to redevelop this property. My responsibility and my goal would be to write the National Register nomination that would make the building eligible for tax credit, for historic tax preservation tax credits. The 3 other buildings included in the Civic Center complex, the courthouse, this building, the Civic Center auditorium, those 3 buildings are already on the National Register of Historic Places. The jail is the only building that was built at this time that has not been included on the National Register. So this is an opportunity to kind of complete the picture and celebrate your city's history. And so our goal would be my responsibility would be to write the National Register nomination under the same criteria of significance that the other 3 buildings have been listed under. Significance for city planning and significance for architecture. Significance would be limited to the date of construction, so mid-1930s, which would then provide some freedom for how Allied Redevelopers would go about with the historic rehabilitation and that process. So again, I urge you to support preserving and rehabilitating this building, and I'll stop there.
Thank you for your comments, sir.
Just may I ask one question? As far as the application, when do you plan on starting work on that, and how long will it take to prepare and file?
So a National Register nomination, typically, what I tell clients is about 30 days to do the research and the writing to put together a draft of the nomination. In the case of this building, we already have so much of the historical record already done. We already have a lot of the historic photographs, and I already have 3 other National Register nominations to build off of. So just be essentially kind of adding to that conversation. After about that 30 days, I would submit a draft to the State Historic Preservation Office, and then they would have about 30 days to review. Provide any comments that they have. Typically, they would have 30 days to review. It would come back to my office. Another, depending on what the comments are, another few days to review and revise and resubmit. Basically, in some ways, it's like submitting a history paper in a lot of ways, where you revise and resubmit. And so it would take about a few days to address their comments. And then at that stage, the state, more than likely, it's been my experience, usually I'd go through one round of revisions, and then the state Historic Preservation Office takes it from there. It would then go through steps. The city council would hear, the state would give a presentation to the city council and to the Historic Preservation Board to consider it, and then it would go on to the state review committee. So typically that takes about another 30 to 45 days to navigate that bureaucracy, and then it would go to the state Historic Preservation Committee, which formally submits nominations to the keeper of the National Register at the federal level. And then after it, and that body meets quarterly, so we aim for it to be at this as soon as possible for that. And then typically, once the state formally submits a National Register nomination to the National Park Service, the keeper of the register has 45 days to formally nominate it to the building. So if you're thinking about timeline, we're looking at mid-July. If I got a nomination done by, let's say, late August, 30 days, in all likelihood, would probably be aiming for the state to make that formal nomination to the keeper of the National Register probably next spring, probably at their April meeting. Would be about a rough estimate for that, and then the feds would have the final say.
Thank you, sir.
I've got a question too before he leaves.
Sorry.
So how does that process help us move this building along? I understand how it helps us set up to save the building in its current state, but what's the plan moving forward on the building?
So with there's two aspects to, there's the National Register of Historic Places side, which I could get going, which we could have moving, and then there's the Historic Preservation Tax Credits side. So, and with the tax credits, there's about a 3-phase process to that. The first phase would be establishing the building's significance, which is basically similar to a National Register nomination. So at the same time as I'm writing a National Register nomination, I'm also preparing a Part 1 application to start the tax credit application process, because they're both run by the National Park Service, but they're under different offices. And then...
You mind if I butt in?
No, not at all.
Sorry, Matthew is an excellent historian, but I think maybe you all want to know more about the possible development process.
Ma'am, would you give us your name
I'm
and
Marva
address,
Ellard.
and keep your comments to about 3 minutes?
Yes, sir. I want to address a few things that were in Brent's report. The 1220 RFP process did not end in a lack of agreement. We never even discussed an agreement. We submitted a proposal and basically never heard anything after that. The 2017 proposal did result in a designation, and Brent and I have been working on that, and we've had a difficult time finding a path forward. I think that's the term that Brent and I like to use, as far as trying to please a lot of different entities, but I don't always know who those entities are. One thing that is attractive about this building is that it has a lot of history for everyone in this room, the police department, the civil rights movement. There is a lot of history there, and we hate to see that history go away. I do buildings like this all the time. That's what I do. Structurally, it's in great shape. The systems, we always replace the systems, so that's nothing new. Has a lot of pigeons in it. It hasn't really been secured very well over the last few years. As late as 2017, the police department was still storing evidence in there. I'm not exactly sure what they were storing, but we were in there in hazmat suits, basically, and police department personnel were walking around in street clothes. So there's a lot of possibilities with that building. The tax credits play a huge role in the financial feasibility of the project. Cities can't really use tax credits, but for-profit developers can. And the amount of tax credits estimated on that project are significant. And to me, that is the difference in being able to do this project and not doing it. No, I didn't specify a purchase price because a land description wasn't given. And so I wasn't going to offer a purchase price on something that I couldn't really tell what was being offered. I think we're still open to a land lease. We're open to selling it back to the city at some point in time for an agreed upon price, or at least having the option for the city to buy it. I don't need to own that building forever. I just want to keep it because of its history and because of its commonalities with the Civic Center and this building and the county courthouse. And so I think what sets cities apart are what they are about and their ability to show their history to generations that come. This building is a hard project, I'm not going to deny that, but I do think it's a feasible project if the city wants to work with us on it or work with another developer. But I'm willing to stay in the process if the city is.
Excuse me, you say, sorry, thank you for your comment. You say significant tax credits, but, so if I'm hearing correctly, about 8-point-something million dollars it would take to renovate. What are we talking about then in terms of significant tax credit? Like what is possible? What's possible and what's the likelihood?
Okay. I'd say the likelihood is 100%. We know that building is eligible for the National Register. The tax credits are based on the cost of the project. I think the 8.6 is high. Our estimates don't show that, but Brent's right, we don't have a purchase price figured in there. But let's say it's $7 million. The state credits are 20% and the federal credits are 20%. So the state credits are worth about 90 cents on the dollar. The new federal credits are probably worth in the neighborhood of 67 to 75 cents on the dollar. So it's a significant amount of money, probably $2.5 million to $3 million.
Just to make sure I understand, we heard an estimate of $8.6 million to renovate. Do we have an appraisal on the land so we can determine what the land's worth? Has anybody done an appraisal?
Councilman Stonesofer, I don't know the answer to that. I've never seen one.
I mean, what are we talking about, the value of the land?
What we're looking at, when I look at, we have not done a formal appraisal, but when I look at comps in the area, it's somewhere between, I think, between 1.8 and 1.3 million dollars. It's the medium is 1.8, and I gave it a 30% discount because of the conditions of the building and everything like that. So
would you agree with me that if we talk about renovation cost at 8.6 and we estimate the appraisal value of the land, we're looking at over $10 million?
If you utilize our estimated cost and plus, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next up, Catherine Montgomery.
I'm Catherine Montgomery. I'm the president and founder of the Preservation and Design Studio. We're at 616 Northwest 21st Street in the historic Arc, built in 1964 for Sunbeam Family Services. So that's a mid-century modern building. This building was constructed by a partnership with the PWA, just like the other three buildings that you've heard about with Matthew and Marva. I did prepare a letter with some attachments for you and sent it to each one of you individually this morning, so you may not have received it. I have one copy with me. I also have a copy of our 2017 proposal. It's 131 pages, obviously something that we put a lot of time and effort into. It rivals the size of the 2012 proposal as well. I have a copy. I'm happy to part with it, but I'm also happy to provide a link to a Dropbox if any of you would be interested in the details of that proposal. I did a little bit of research and included for you some photographs that I think represent the pride of Oklahoma City's police department in 1940, standing in front of their new police headquarters building. I think that all along this process, we have been referring to the building inappropriately. It was designed to be a police headquarters. We simply seem to choose to remember it as a jail, but it was a police headquarters. It also included a traffic court. So there was a courtroom on the first floor on the north side. There was a police department gym on the south side of the first floor. So those photographs are waiting for you in your email. I also provided a photograph from 1957. It's an aerial that shows the 4 buildings looking towards the east that were a part of that PWA development. It also includes parking on the lots that are now occupied by the later police addition and the courts addition. Then I provided a few photographs, one that is very significant to me, of Clara Luper and her friends coming out of the jail during the civil rights movement, and some photographs of them inside the building. It's clear that this building represents a lot of rich Oklahoma City history. We've only scratched the surface, and we would look forward to writing a National Register nomination to document more of that history, and we would look forward to actually being able to follow through on the plans that we've spent many hours preparing for the redevelopment of the PWA Police Headquarters. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Excuse me, have you been in contact with Brent?
Yes, I'm part of
You're with
the development team with Marva.
Okay.
Yes, our
okay.
company,
I didn't know
yes.
if there was. I didn't know if you were a second. I was like, oh my goodness, this is.
No, that is the proposal that we put together as Allied Redevelopers.
Thank you.
Councilwoman?
Yeah, so I'd just like to thank you all for entertaining my deferrals for the last few months or so I can get caught up on kind of what you all just heard. And I was able to bring a group of folks together that have been involved in this kind of story over the past couple years. And I was kind of, it was interesting to me that in that conversation, the thing we actually spent most of our time on was not the merits of saving the building, it was on parking. And that the fact that with the municipal courts and the new police headquarters, those were surface parking lots that we built buildings on. And so now there is a need for people who are coming to municipal courts and coming to the police headquarters to have a place to park. And to me, my concern is that we are potentially letting go of a historic building that, I think we recognize that a lot of our downtown was demolished in the 50s and 60s. And amazingly, we have a few of those buildings left. And so in my mind, I want to do everything I can to work to try to save that building, particularly if the idea is that we would just demolish it for what has been shown to be a particularly valuable piece of land for storage of cars. Especially when, as I think a lot of people recognize, we have a very empty parking garage just across the street that's just a few blocks from each of these new buildings. So I'm interested in I think and I recognize that previously the city council has not been interested in putting city funds towards trying to rehabilitate the building. But it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, is that we have some real experts in historic preservation and in reuse of buildings like this that seem very dedicated to potentially saving this building and putting it to use so that it can serve the people coming downtown for visiting the courts or visiting police headquarters, or even the staff that are in those buildings. So that's kind of been my kind of desire in saving the building and seeing what we can do to work with, whether it's this group of developers or a different one. But the thing that I kind of keep hearing is that the agreement just hasn't been reached, but that parties seem open to trying to figure something out. And so that's why I've been asking for that deferral and trying to keep parties talking. And I'd like to ask for another deferral. However, I am open to, I recognize that the old let me see how it's written in the memo, the old municipal court building and the old police headquarters. No one seems terribly interested in doing anything with those, and so I'm also open to potentially making a motion to amend this application to remove the 200 North Chartel property and go forward with those permits to try to at least get that piece moving forward while we still work with seeing what we might be able to do about the 200 North Chartel property. So that's kind of what my thoughts are.
Francis, can we entertain such a motion?
Well, they're two separate motions. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm
One
open
is
to either
defer
of them.
and one is to amend.
Yes. Yeah, so I'd be interested, I guess, hearing from you all what your thoughts are on either of those motions.
Councilwoman. Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
I guess the thing I'm trying to understand, and I'm not clear on yet, is are you talking about going forward as far as the municipal court building and the police headquarters going ahead with demolition and just saving the one building? Do we have an estimate on what the demolition cost would be for those two buildings, Brent? I think we were under the impression that we'd have greater savings by doing all three at once.
Right, demolition would be right at $1.56 million for just the courts and the police headquarters, it's estimated by Public Works.
And do we have an estimate on how many additional parking spaces that would
That
give
would
us?
provide 133, estimated approximately 133
And we
parking
lost
spaces.
235 with the new buildings?
Approximately, yes.
Well,
Do we know what, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, well, I think that's a fair thing to do as far as amend and defer.
I like the amend and defer approach too. My only question would be, how do we ensure that the communication between the interested parties continues, particularly given the timeline that Matthew gave us? Like, how can we ensure that these entities are all talking with each other with a sense of urgency would be my concern? Because, I mean, when did this begin? 2012? So, I mean, y'all know I ran a whole campaign about honoring our local history, but how can we make sure that you all are talking with each other? I'd be happy to participate when and how if possible, but I think there's an interest in this. We just want to make sure that there is a moving forward would be a question I would.
So part of the process that Matthew outlined, of course, it's a lengthy process. Generally, properties get listed on the National Register. You're lucky if you get it done in 6 months, just because the state board only meets 4 times a year. But the National Register process and the tax credit process can run concurrently. And the only requirement when you're claiming the tax credits is that the building is listed on the National Register within 2 years of completion of the project. So we actually have a long period of time to get it listed. The Part 1, you know, that's processed in 30 plus 30 days, 30 days at the SHPO, 30 days at the Park Service. So that's just part of the nuts and the bolts of the project, and I think what's more important is that coming to agreement with the city as to what the property boundaries entail, what the development boundaries entail, and you know, what terms there are. There's always room for changing the program. In an RFP, you have to come up with an idea. So we came up with an idea, and Marva took a lot of time to vet various tenants that were interested in, say, providing a laundry service. That's all included in the proposal, as well as all the other functions that were being proposed. If there are some of those functions that the city doesn't feel would be appropriate to be in that building, then obviously the development team is interested in revising the program to make it agreeable. So the process can actually, I mean, I can tell Matthew gets started on that nomination. I can tell him that this afternoon. But I'm reluctant to spend any more time and money working on this project without some guarantee that it's actually going to move forward.
Let's take questions from the council only. Are there any more comments or questions?
I got a question. I just, I try to think through these things logically. And we've got 3 buildings here, one that was built in 35, one that was built in 51, and one that was built in 68. And we're talking about saving the older one of the three. Yet, you know, we talk about how back in the 50s and 60s, we tore down buildings from the 30s. And so now we're talking about tearing down buildings that are 50 or 60, 70 years old. Yet those two are the ones that we're not really focusing on, and to me it seems like the newer buildings would be easier to rehabilitate. So I'm just trying to think through this a little bit logically, like why would we want to save the older one that we've already gone through 2 processes to try to save it, and it doesn't seem like, I mean, I would think that it would have worked by then, but then the other 2 we just moved out of, yet we don't have any conversation about saving those 2. So help me with my,
You are
try
correct.
to make some logical
You are
sense
correct
of
that the other 2 would probably be deemed historic too. We think the most significant building is the police headquarters building because of things that happened there, because of its relationship to this building and the Civic Center. I mean, we'd be happy to look at all 3 of them if you so choose, but
I know, I can't believe I just said all that.
I would really say that this process really just started in 2018, because when we answered the 2012 RFP, we really never heard another word. And so a lot of you in your personal professions deal with real estate, and I think we all know that to have a successful real estate transaction, you have to have 2 willing participants in that. And I think we're willing, and I think there are willing people in the city, and I do think it can be done. It's not easy. I think, Councilman Grinder, one thing is we felt like we needed to pick our battle to some extent on these 3, and the old police headquarters to us was the most significant.
Yeah. Well, and I just know that, you know, we talk about the WPA era a lot, and we value that style, and yet the mid-century, I mean, the old police headquarters, in my opinion, is just kind of an ugly building. But in 20 years, it might not be ugly anymore. You know, there will be people that don't, I just know how the trends go and how, so it just, I'm just trying to make sense of it, so.
And you're right.
I'm just thinking out loud.
You know, pretty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yep.
You know, and so
For sure.
I had to develop
Like buried cars with booyah on it, right?
Ms. Eller, while you're up, may I ask a question? How much?
Yes, sir.
What's the amount of funds you have available to invest in this project at this time?
I have lines of credit, and I have banks willing to finance this project. And so, plus with the tax credits, which are counted as equity in projects like this, I think that we can get it financed.
So I'm asking, do you have the $10 million?
Commitments?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's a $10 million project. I think it's closer to an $8 million project. I haven't taken anything to a loan committee because I don't have a contract on a property. I've talked to several banks about it, and they seem interested in pursuing it.
I think to echo on David's comments, and you asked for our thoughts on this, the thing that concerns me, I went back and looked at the Stage Center expert report, and I'm not going to get these numbers exactly right, but to renovate it was somewhere around $8 to $10 million because it had extensive flooding problems. And what the report concluded, as I remember it, was that even every organization that went in there failed, and that even if we renovated that, would there be an organization that could go in there and operate at a profit and service the debt? And so I'm kind of concerned the way David is, unless we have some fixed numbers on whatever goes in there could service the debt, I don't want to get, midway through this and it stalls out. And so this is your ward. If you want to try to preserve it, I'll support you on that. But I want to put a specific time limit. I don't want to piecemeal this out. I want to put a specific time limit on. Marva gives us hard numbers to look at, and her commitments, her loan commitments and things she has to do it. Because if it's not there, whatever we put in there can't service the debt, we've wasted a lot of time and a lot of money.
Well, I assume that some of that information is in that previous proposal with those LOIs of potential businesses or...
Well, and I'm sure a lot of that needs to be updated since that was submitted in 2017, but I think Councilman Stump-Cypher's request is certainly reasonable. I wouldn't want to be in that position either. I wouldn't want you all to be caught in the middle on that, but to revise numbers and to get new commitments on tenants and things would take a little bit of time. But I'm certainly willing to work with Brent or whomever the council wants me to work with on it to get that information together, get construction costs, anything like that.
Think you could do that in 30 days?
No.
How long would it take you to do it?
Can I tell you this afternoon? Okay. I understand, but to get a cost estimator to update construction costs, we're going to need better access to the building. That building's been hard to get good access to. Brent and I were making a list of things that we feel like we still need to talk through on the lot size, some other things. He can talk more about that, but if you'll just give me a little time to get a timeline together, I'd be happy to submit that.
One thing that I did want to stress, she and I were talking about that, the key things that have come to light when we were trying to work out an arrangement for this project was purchase price. And that's a key one because that'll add $1.3 to $1.8 million more to her development costs. The other one is there's a smokestack. The smokestack is somewhat away from the jail, but there's discussion as to whether if that comes down, that will negatively impact the historical tax credits if they make the building, make those available. So those are two of the key things, and the other one was uses. What uses can a public safety campus have in the middle of it? And so those are kind of the three things that we have to iron out.
The other thing, Vice Mayor, I'd like to hear from...
Just a minute. Okay. We've heard a lot. There's a lot of unanswered questions. Craig has got an idea that he would like to put forward at this time.
So one option, I was trying to clarify actually with Francis what we could do here, because we were talking about deferral or talking about dividing the two proposals. And I think an option we could do is we could divide and let the police and courts, the police headquarters and courts building move forward, and then have the jail be on the deferral, just deferring the jail as an option. So you actually could do both to keep the one project moving ahead.
I'd also like to hear from our new police chief as to the needs for parking, so I can get a better picture on that.
And then relatedly, the smokestack, did I say that right? Yeah, I'm excited to hear that that's on the table, because after we went over there, that was a structure that really stood out to me that's part of the old, not old, but the police headquarters that's no longer there, or is there, but we're not using. If that old police headquarters goes away, does that include the smokestack? Because that's part of that.
I think that's what he said they have to iron out to figure out.
So we'd have, but if we were to push forward on the demolition today of those two buildings, how would we be able to guarantee that smokestack doesn't also go down, is my question.
I think too, we'll have a couple of things, and Brent kind of went through it with the timeline, but this really would move it towards to DDRC for review. You know, if we move something forward, we would still have to come back with specifications and going out for bid on the demolition, and we would clarify what we have included in the demolition at that time. And then we'd come back after the bids come in and have an award of contract before the council again. So you'd see it a couple more times before they get there, and we can iron that out, as we're working through the discussion.
Is that really the only reason why we're demolishing them? Is for surface parking?
No,
I mean, do we not have an actual plan?
No.
Because,
so the reason that we're demolishing, we don't have a use for the old headquarters and old courts buildings.
Mm-hmm.
They were coming down. We did need to replace a significant amount of parking that we lost, and really a lot of it is with police vehicles. And so we have a lot of need that's there, even with what we're talking about with just the police headquarters and the courts building. It doesn't take care of all of the parking needs that were there. So we understood that going in. The idea with the courts, with the jail buildings, we didn't see it being viable to go forward with the development. Saw the difficulties there. We didn't have a use for the building itself to actually use that going forward. And so it was really more of making the decision. We've got to get to a point where we make a decision. Are we going to redevelop it or are we going to tear it down? If we tear it down, we would add surface parking there for the time, but it's only because the opportunity is there and it could expand our parking that we need for police. It would not be that it preempts us from doing any other type of development in the future. Actually having it as surface parking just means it's really preserved, and we would have that available if there were other development opportunities. Because Councilwoman Hammond mentioned it's a valuable piece of property, and I think as that area continues to develop, it's going to become even more valuable. So that was just, it is not that the jail comes down for the purpose of parking, but it would be used for surface parking if it did come down. Sorry, Chief. We interrupted you there.
Wade Gorley, Chief of Police. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've heard a lot of different things about, plans and the parking concerns. And first off, I view this as a public safety campus and what would be utilized by that building that has a public safety interest. And I don't see one that fits into the scheme of the police department and our plans moving forward and what we would want in that campus as far as a police service out of that building. The second part of that I think gets left out a little bit when you talk about parking is about 3 weeks ago, maybe about 4 weeks ago, I sat down and I talked to our victim services folks because I wanted to see what the impact was of parking on the services that we provide. And I just asked them, I said, when you look at the service you provide to our victims, what are the things that provide barriers to you getting those services to the victims? And I asked them to rank them in order. And although number one was parking, the other two below that were related to parking too. And they said that people that want to come down and get their services, and of course we'll go to them, but we're limited in that because Oklahoma City covers over 600 square miles. And so it's not just the fact that they don't have a close place to park where, they're bringing children and other things that come with them when they come in for those services, but it's being able to even something as simple as affording to pay a parking meter and those kind of things. And all of those things were related to parking. And so I think a lot of times we lose sight of, we think we're just storing police vehicles. There will be a need to store some police vehicles there that we have, but the bigger issue is that I foresee going in there is where we line up parking along the front side of that lot on the south end of that to where when people come in for victim services, they're right there and they have easy access to the department.
Thank you, Chief.
You bet. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I do have some questions and comments.
Go ahead, sir.
Continue on. So here's my concerns. The cost to rehab, according to Brent, is over $580 a square foot. Banks aren't going to loan money on that kind of a redevelopment activity. If we throw in the cost of the land to the cost, and what I'm saying is that to renovate approximately 13,000 feet at close to $8 million, you get around.
I'm sorry, Councilman Greenwell, the building's over 40,000 square.
Yeah, but you're only going to use 2 floors.
No, we're going to use all of it for income producing uses.
All 6 floors?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I'd still like to see the money before we turn over anything. But in terms of the use of it, because if we look at, we want to protect real estate buildings that were constructed via the WPA. We've got 3 facilities currently in use. They are in much better condition than what this jail is. And if organizations want to support that, we welcome private funds coming in to help maintain this building, the Civic Center, as well as the courthouse. I think that's where private funds should be focusing on, is protect the buildings that are currently being used, that are in relatively good conditions, and forego this. You know, we talk about, oh, that jail brings a lot of great memories to us. I think for every great memory, although I can't think of too many, there's 1,000 bad memories for citizens of Oklahoma City who grew up here with respect to a jail. It's just not a facility that is on the forefront of many citizens' minds in terms of protecting and remembering it. Again, if we're looking strictly at architecture, we've got 3 buildings currently in use that people can look towards for examples of WPA projects. We don't need a building that was abandoned because it's really no longer useful. And in terms of the use of that area, I mean, we should not be limiting ourselves at this point in time to strictly a parking lot. We've heard, for example, a proposal on from Palomar. That area could be used along something like that. We will be hearing from another proposal in the upcoming weeks on a deterrent type program that would be that could be used in this particular area. That would be ideal between the municipal courts and police headquarters, as well as I would reach out to the county jail committee to see in terms of what could be done with this particular piece of property as they look towards alternatives to the current county jail. There are so many possible uses for this property other than an old jail that's been abandoned that really doesn't have anything of itself to offer anyone. So those are my comments.
Given the discussion, are we ready to take some action and move forward?
I am.
On one of these?
Well, I have one question, and I want Marva to succeed at this. And Marva said she could give us some numbers this afternoon. I don't want to put that kind of urgency upon her. I want to give her some time. And so I would just say defer this till our next council meeting, and let's see what Marva's come up with and how long it's going to take her to really do all this. And that'll weigh in on my decision on how I'm going to vote on this overall. If it's something that she can do in the next few months, then I'm interested. If it's something that's going to take 2 years, I have my doubts about that. And so I'd just like to defer it to the next meeting if that's okay with you.
I think I'd be, and I'll just be like pretty upfront. Like the reason that the deferral, I've continued the deferrals is because I do this part-time. Like the time to be able to get 6 parties in a room when you work full-time and do this part-time is difficult. And so, and my ability to even spend time communicating and all of that is very limited. And so that's where I would prefer to just amend and remove the 200 North Chartel property and then maybe defer it for 60 or 90 days just to give that ability to really just like, I spend, I have like 8 hours a week that I can do this. So that's, and among all of us.
We're talking about 2 different things. I'm just talking about having Marva give us a timeline of what it's going to take for her to do it, and then we can do that.
Okay.
I'm not talking about meetings. I'm not talking about sitting down with people. Defer it to the next meeting. Let's see where she's at, and let's try and help her.
Okay, I'm open to that. So I guess.
Move we defer it to the next meeting.
I second that. Sir?
By the next city council meeting, you could present to us a timeline and a budget and
A timeline.
Yeah, it's just a timeline.
I'll commit to a timeline, and thank you, Councilman
Yeah,
Stone
what she needs.
I think, because I need some time with Brent, I think, and I need some time to make sure that we've got all the pieces there to consider, but I think by the next council meeting, which would be, when would the next council meeting be? The 30th? That I could give a timeline that would lay out the phases of it, and as Councilman Stonecipher said, the time for different things. I think we can accomplish that.
Thank you.
Just curious, do we have any idea of how much we spend on maintaining those shuttered buildings annually?
I don't have a number, but I'll get you one.
Thank you.
All right, well, in where we are right now, we have a motion to defer for 2 weeks
And a second.
and a second, okay? Are there any questions pertinent to that? Do not see any, please cast your votes. And the deferral passes, so the item is deferred for 2 weeks. Do we need any, what's our next action, Francis?
Motion to approve the consent docket.
We need a motion and a second to approve the consent docket.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And the consent docket is approved. Next up is the concurrence docket.
I'd move the single item.
We have a motion and a second to move the concurrence. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And the concurrence docket is passed. Now we're on items that need an individual vote. And the first one up is Ward 8. PC 10587.
Your Honor, this is an ordinance on final hearing. It's to rezone some land from AA Agricultural to O1 Limited Office District. It went before the Planning Commission on May 23rd, 29, and was unanimously approved, and so I'd move for its approval.
We have a motion and a second. Comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And it is approved. Next up, PC 10588, 3108 Southwest 119th Street, Ward 5.
Thank you, Your Honor. This was approved unanimously by the Planning Commission. It's a lowering of the zoning from AA to R1 single family. Is there anyone here to speak? I would recommend approval.
We have a motion and a second. Comments? Please cast your votes. And it is unanimously approved. Next up, Ward 2, PC 10589.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Is there anyone here to speak on this particular development? Seeing that it was approved in planning, I would move approval.
Motion and second. Comments or questions? And it is approved unanimously. Next up, PC 10590.
Yeah, this is an abandoned event center is what the current use of this property is. So this zoning application would change it from C3 to I2. There's a lot of light and moderate industrial uses being used now, and so it has a staff approval, PC approval, and no protests that I know of, so I'll move for approval.
We have a motion and a second. Comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And it is unanimously approved. PC 10591, Ward 5.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a item that was passed unanimously by the Planning Commission. It's a change in zoning from O2 General Office to C3 Community Commercial District. I know the attorney here for the applicant is here. Anyone else, Francis? No. David, would you mind speaking to this particular issue? As we spoke recently, my concern is over the growth in car dealerships along I-240. It's not planned that this area would be converted into a car lot, mainly just due to its size. Is there any way we could, or does C3 community commercial include car dealerships?
Sure. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. So what C3 does as it relates to car dealerships is it actually requires another layer. So it would require a special permit. So even if my client sold this to someone that owned more property where they could make it work as a car dealership, they'd have to file a subsequent zoning case through a special permit that would go through Planning Commission, ultimately City Council on an ordinance if they were to ever be able to utilize it as a car dealership.
Great, okay. And it's your understanding the applicant is planning to use this for retail purposes?
Correct. No intent whatsoever to use it as a car dealership.
Okay, thank you. With that, I would recommend approval.
Motion is second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes.
Thank you.
It is unanimously approved.
Thank you.
Next up, PC 10593, Ward 8.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is an ordinance on final hearing to rezone a planned unit development to AA Agricultural District. Planning Commission approved this, and I am aware of no protests, so I'd move for its approval.
A motion is second. Comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And it's unanimously approved. Next up, PC 10594, Ward 8.
This is, again, Ward 8. It's an ordinance on final approval. It's, again, rezoning a planned unit development to single-family residential. There were no protests, and it was approved by the Planning Commission, so I'd move for its approval, sir.
A motion is second. Comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And it's unanimously approved. Next up, PC 1702, Ward 3. I see the applicant present. If you would come forward, please, sir. This has an interesting history to it. I'd like you to speak to it. At one time, there was a significant protest, and now it comes to us with no citizen to be heard and no protest.
Correct. David Box, again, 522 Colcord Drive. This is the last piece of what was the old Westbury Golf Course. And as Councilman McAtee indicated, this is probably the fourth or fifth zoning case I've had on this. The previous ones, these chambers were full of citizens. And what happened after the golf course shut down was the land sat there for quite some time. Eventually went to auction. Several different developers bought pieces of it. And what that allowed us to do as we went through the rezoning process was to meet with neighbors and citizens time and time again. The neighbors that initially protested here and what you would have seen in your packet live in the neighborhood to the west. Initially, when we filed this PUD, we had included uses such as restaurants and other light commercial type uses. That was a problem with the neighborhood, and so we sat down to work with the neighborhood and limited the uses to just 4 in this PUD, that being administrative and professional offices, business support services, medical services restricted, and medical services general. After we agreed to limit those uses, that allowed the neighbors to come on board and support our project. At Planning Commission, one of the ladies from the neighborhood did appear just to say that she was supportive of the project. And so with that, Planning Commission did recommend approval of this unanimously. And as Councilman indicated, there are no citizens here to be heard on this that I'm aware of. So we'd ask for your approval. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
Any questions for David? It was unanimously approved by the Planning Commission. Nobody's here to protest. Unless the council has any questions, I move for approval. Please cast your votes. And it is approved.
Thank you.
Next up, Ward 1. Is this still on? We haven't stricken it.
Is this the 1694?
Number 9.
Number 9.
This one's the one that's,
okay.
This one is good, this one's out.
SPUD 1121, Ward 7.
Thank you. This is an ordinance for final hearing recommended for approval for commercial district C3 from 02 to a SPUD 1121. So I understand there was a protester present and her mind was put at ease.
Yes, once again, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. There was an individual here. She believed the application to allow a second sign. Once she learned that it would just be the one sign, she seemed to be satisfied. She was aware of when this meeting was. I did make myself available to answer any questions if she had it, and I never received any word from her. So I do believe that she was satisfied.
Okay. And I do understand this is a single sign, and it's just a bigger sign of what's already there. So with that, there is a comparable sign within the ward already on a different location. So with that, I move for approval.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes.
Thank
And
you.
it's approved. The next item we do not, has
That's correct. It was withdrawn by the applicant.
withdrawn by the applicant. So moving on, SPUD 1059, Ward 7.
Yes, thank you so much. This is an ordinance for a final hearing, and this has been recommended for denial, and I'm not sure if the applicant is present. But I will say that I did personally go and knock the doors of the neighbors that live on this street to get a better understanding of what they wanted, how they felt about this development, and they are very concerned. And Planning Commission did deny this application, so I will move that we do the same.
Okay, we have a motion to deny. Any comments or questions? Go right ahead, sir.
So in supporting the denial, would we be voting yes?
We're denying this application to support the community and the neighbors. So this is to deny this application.
Voting yes would mean
Yes.
denying.
I move to deny.
Turn the green light on.
We need to get you some coffee, some more coffee.
Any more procedural questions? If not, please cast your votes. And it is denied. All right. Next item, Mr. Manager.
Item D is just an ordinance on final hearing on the fees for wet stall and dry stall for storage at our lakes. And that was presented by Chris Browning on June 18th and had a public hearing on the 2nd, so it's just a final hearing. And on for approval.
And we need for a vote.
Yes.
We need a motion and a second.
I motion for approval. Oh, second.
Comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And it is so done. Next up.
Next item is item E, and this was presented by Steve Kreis with the Municipal Counselor's Office at the last meeting, and this is just on for the public hearing. This is on the low-speed vehicles. It was changing the requirements on vehicle for hire to allow for the low-speed vehicles.
So this is an opportunity for any citizens to be heard.
Correct.
This is the public hearing on this item. Seeing none, moving on. To updated structures.
Yes.
We have a resolution to declare these properties dilapidated. We have a second. Any comments or questions? Cast your votes, and they are moved on, dilapidated. Public hearing for unsecured structures. Have a motion? A second? Comments or questions? No citizens have signed up to be heard, correct? Please cast your votes, and they are declared unsecured. Next up, resolution declaring properties abandoned. We have a motion and a second. Comments or questions? Please cast your votes, and they are declared abandoned. Okay, next item, Mr. Manager.
Yes, this item is a little bit unusual. We don't really feel like we need an executive session unless the council wants more information, but I have asked Matt Boggs is Assistant City Treasurer. He is over the Revenue Enforcement Program. This is relating to a hotel that was delinquent on their taxes, and this is getting this cleared up. So if you can just give us a real quick high-level overview on this one.
Okay, yes, as was mentioned, as in your packet, we did have a hotel that had been delinquent for a number of months. We did sign a promissory note for them to take care of that, which they paid for a few months. defaulted on. They are now in receivership, and the receiver has yet to pay hotel taxes at this point. We got in contact with the receiver. They have come in. What they have requested is if the judgment be assigned to the receiver, and if that case, if they can waive essentially the penalty that would be associated with these amounts. The total amount owed is about $150,000. The penalty associated with that is around $58,000. And then they would pay the rest of the tax and interest, which totals about $92,000. So in summary, they would pay $92,000, we would waive $58,000.
And it is our recommendation to move forward with this.
I'd move the item.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And it is so ordered. Next item, we have two items. We need to vote them separately to go to executive session.
Make a motion to move item J to executive session.
Comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And it is moved to executive session. And now for item K.
Move the item into executive session.
We have a motion and a second. Comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And it is moved to executive session. Next up, claims to be approved.
Move the items.
Any citizen wishing to be heard on this? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And the claims are approved. Items for council. Let's start with James. None?
I did have one thing. So I just wanted to speak to an event that will be happening this weekend, particularly, and actually really something I'd like to say is just really want to commend our police department for their stance as it relates to working with immigration's ICE. Because, this past weekend, I'm sure a lot of us know that the president made a statement on Twitter telling a number of congresswomen to essentially go back where they came from if they don't like it here. And to me, that just speaks to a sort of un-Americanness of, criticizing our government means that I think that's like maybe the most American thing we can do because that's why the U.S. was started in the first place. So I do want to just communicate and commend our police department for, that we don't target people based on immigration status. And I really appreciate that, given that a lot of the folks in the south part of my ward come from the Hispanic community. I've talked with many of them that still express fear of communicating with law enforcement, but a lot of them do understand and are trusting of our police department, and I just really do appreciate that. And there is a group that this weekend is going to be gathering folks from Oklahoma City to travel to Fort Sill. This happened way faster than I was able to pull up the information, but there will be an event to go stand in support of the folks that are being detained at Fort Sill. They'll be meeting in Oklahoma City at, I think it's 8:45. So if anyone is interested in going with the group that's doing that, please feel free to reach out to me and I can get you more information or connect you with them. But again, I do just want to commend our police department for their interest in connecting with the citizens of the residents of our city that maybe aren't documented. So thank you.
Your Honor.
Nikki.
Oh, sorry. Just real quick. I'm sorry, that sparked something.
Let's get this and we'll come back.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Nikki?
Thank you. I do want to say a couple things. I want to say congratulations to the zoo. I know last week we had our first round of our MAPS presentations, and on that same day, we talked about the 29th anniversary of the dedicated sales tax to the Oklahoma City Zoo, and it was free for everyone to attend. And I just want to say thank you, Oklahoma City, because we showed up and we showed out. In the 116-year history of the Oklahoma City Zoo, we hit our single best day of attendance with 23,294 people coming to the Oklahoma City Zoo. And I think that in itself speaks volumes to the great work that they're doing to promote the animals, to promote just the friendly atmosphere, and just to promote the destination of Oklahoma City and the Adventure District. So kudos to them. I was, obviously, I was 23,200 in that 94th person. But it was just an amazing day. They had me walking around and riding in the carts, waving at people, looking at different things that are part of the zoo. And I must say, if you have not been lately, you get to rediscover it every single time that you go. And speaking of that, I do want to say something exciting is happening. We talked about it and we heard about the presentation for Camp Trevera for the Girl Scouts of Western Oklahoma for their summer camp. Well, this week, the south end of the Zoo Lake, it's going to be closed because they are actually beginning that construction, and they are anticipating the completion in July of 2020. But the park gates will remain open from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. So if anyone has any concerns, please just contact our office and we'll get you kind of a map of what that looks like and where your concerns can be brought and how we can work together for the construction and the impacts of that. And also want to say this past Saturday we were at the Black Foodie Summit that happened at Bistro 46, and it was a lot of good food. We were highlighting the many small Black entrepreneurs as far as businesses, food trucks, chefs, and there were so many people in attendance. And just for us to be exposed as a city to those that are within our communities that are in small business and wanting to expose themselves to our city, I think that speaks volumes for us to continue to support. And I also wanted to make mention of Mr. Ronnie Kirk, who is here with us, and he asked me to come out. They rode the streetcar on the 7th of July, which was a hot Sunday afternoon, but I came out and waited with them while they waited for everyone to get on that streetcar, and I'm pretty sure that they had a good time on that streetcar. So I appreciate you for inviting me to be with you all and looking forward to September as well. So that's all that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Just briefly, Your Honor, I wanted to remind everybody about our penalty reduction program that we've implemented through the municipal court system. Under the program, we have 116,000 warrants that we're trying to get off the books and records of Oklahoma City. And in the last couple of weeks, we received roughly $10,483 that came in the door. And I would encourage each one of us on the council to communicate this to others in your ward about the availability of this program and that fact that it ends on March 31st of next year, so we've got some time, and I'm proud of what it's doing. Let's do better, and let's keep communicating it to others. We're getting ready to do a big advertising campaign in the next couple of weeks, so everybody come in and pay their fines.
Thank you, sir. James.
Thank you. And apologies for getting in, trying to earlier. Joe Beth just sparked my memory. I wanted to thank Spring Lake Police Division and the Hefner Division. I went on a ride-along in each of those two respective divisions last week. One at Hefner during the Monday afternoon with Officer Holt, and Officer Holt, by the way. And then also Friday evening over at Spring Lake. And in both instances, I want to commend the officers because they were responding to situations where people were in crisis. One person was an autistic teen, and there was a lot of violence there in him, and I watched Officer Holt de-escalate that. And I watched him communicate with Officer Farwick about what the best approach in that situation was in terms of getting that kiddo access to mental health with parents who were who were desperate. And to watch these two officers negotiate that with that kid and with those parents was really stunning to watch. And they stayed as calm as anyone possibly could in that scenario. And I just really want to take time to commend them. And these were new recruits. And so I'm hopeful that that means that these new recruits are really understanding what best practices look like going forward, and I saw that in action. And then in the Spring Lake Division, something similar, we were up in North Highlands, and, seeing a young man who, had some mental health problems as well, who people had reported had committed, a crime, but this officer knew who this kid was because he had built a relationship with that community. And that was really encouraging to watch too. And so I think during this time where there's, this sort of national turmoil, it is very encouraging to see these officers on the street taking best practices, having those body cameras and knowing when, just like they just click it on just like that. And that's what I'm very hopeful to see going forward. And I just wanted to commend you all for that and allowing me that opportunity. And I look forward to doing more of those in the future.
Thank you, sir. Citizens to be heard. First one, Marcia Funk. If you would, give us your name and address, and keep your comments to 3 minutes, if you would.
Marcia Funk, 931 Northwest 15th Street. I'm also the Executive Director of the Greater Oklahoma City Parks and Trails Foundation. You may be familiar with it. Our mission is to work with donors, community organizations, and Central Oklahoma municipal government, state agencies, and we work to educate, program, and advocate for parks and public spaces in the city. The group actually began as a project of Class 10 of Leadership Oklahoma City, and today we're housed at the Community Foundation, and we have our own board, we have our own projects, and our own investment endowment fund. So the partnership makes sense because we've worked with Oklahoma City Community Foundation, and that foundation has funded more than 467 projects. I think you heard a little bit about that last week, and also invested more than $4.5 million in our trees beautification projects and parks and amenities on public school playgrounds across the city. But today I came to thank you for the partnership with the City of Oklahoma City Parks and Recreation and with planning. We produced a map of our trails in Oklahoma City, and I want to share it with you. We would encourage you to get out on the trails. On one side, you'll see a map of the 14 trails in the city, and on the other side, you'll see the details of each of those trails. But when you get out and explore them with us, you set an example for others. And you know that kids, families, and individuals who explore nature are going to be healthier, happier, and they're also going to be smarter. So it's a good idea. Individuals who get out with programming in parks leads to 25% increased access in people who exercise, and that's good for our city. We hope you'll continue to support us. We appreciate it. According to the Trust for Public Lands, Oklahoma City ranks 97th out of the 100 most populous cities for how well we meet residents' needs for parks. And as a big league city, we think we can do better, and we look forward to working with you in the months ahead and the years ahead to make an improvement in that position. And we hope you, and we appreciate your help in considering the maps for projects. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ronnie Kirk.
My name is Ronnie Kirk from 2328 North Missouri, from Ward 7. Today I come to speak as a teacher. When we had 40,000 teachers come at the Capitol, I was also there on strike with them. But today I'm also a learner. I learn what our city needs for our young generation. Mr. Pete White, he spoke behind Mr. Doug Copper about the restrooms we need in all areas. Mr. Pete White, Mr. Copper said, if it's not 40 acres, there's no restroom. A lot of our restrooms are less than that 10 acres, or less than 10. That means there will be no restrooms there. I also plan to go meet at Crossland Rental, the managers, about the restroom. Can they help the city with a lower budget so they could put even one restroom in all the restrooms? We don't have to wait for those $1 million restrooms. We need restrooms there today. And also, I managed McKinley property for 25 years. I could bring a $40,000 budget within $150. I took care of some of Barry Swiss's properties down there in Norman. I could bring their budget in within 150, not over, under. I always met their budget. I know how to manage. And I'm talking with a gentleman that worked for Advanced Automotive about helping these kids and their parents get them a car or a truck, a SUV, so that if the city gives these kids these jobs, that they're going to need something to go pick up the material, which you don't have to hire adults to do it. If these kids can do it, and their parents can get the SUV for them, and they can go pick up the material for them. Also, we're going to give her the company, going to try to give them some pressure washers, good enough to wash them out, the portable restroom. It'll bring your budget down. You can put these restrooms there. You can get these kids these jobs. And so the pictures I gave y'all, that's my 6-year-old kid, a 13-year-old, and a 15-year-old. They got their own little company started up, just blowing balloons up. So I'm teaching. Kids are learning. They want to learn. They want to make money. So if the teachers, if the city council help out by giving some of these jobs, clean up downtown, they can sweep up downtown, they can clean the park area, they can keep all the debris up and make the city beautiful. You'll be helping out everybody, not just one side of town, but all sides of town. So let's do something for these kids, and we keep them out of the jails, keep them from stealing, keep them from robbing. Let's give them some of these jobs. They can make it too. They don't want to do the things we had to do when y'all can help our kids. We already got our parks coming. We always know where they're coming. We already know we budgeted for them. And so the budget can be brought down if the kids get these jobs, and the parents will help the kids go pick up the material that they need, and the kids can go supply the restroom. They can take care of cleaning out the restroom. The couple said 3 times a week and 2 times a week during the wintertime. The kids can do that. It don't take no adult to do all this stuff when we can help these kids out. If we want to stop this robbing and stealing and taking from each other, let's give these kids a job. We can do it. We can all think together, and I'll be one of you 14 thinking with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you, sir.
Next up, city manager report.
Yes, and so we've got the sales tax report is on, the July sales tax. So it's our first check that we get for the year. It came in at it was 1.8% growth, but it was a little bit below what our target was for the year, so a little bit slower than we expected. We got 2% growth projected for the full year. The expectation was to have a little bit better growth in the first part of the year, with it slowing in the second part of the year. So it was a little bit below our target, about 300,000 below target. The good news was that use tax exceeded target, just continues to be very strong, and so it exceeded target and offset those losses. But it is something for us to just monitor closely with the sales taxes we're coming in, that things are going to be slowing down a little bit. And so overall, good report. I did want to mention too, Councilman Cooper had asked about a presentation with the MAPS program on MAPS 4 on sustainable design, and I had said we weren't going to have one. Aubrey corrected me and said that the mayor had requested on August the 6th if she would do a presentation on sustainable design. So we will have that on with the August 6th MAPS 4 workshop. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. We have executive session. We will return.